This is Hog Farmer Chris from the Hog Farmers Charitable Foundation. And before you start listening to Red Zone in the Lab, check out our Amazon Smile, a simple way to support the Hog Farmers Charitable Foundation every time you shop, and it's no cost to you.
We're back! Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.
Welcome to a brand new season of the Red Zone in the Lab podcast, where nothing is off the table. We will be discussing entrepreneurship, education, Black history, health, movies, family, and of course, sports. So do yourself a favor, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow on all social media platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, you can always visit us at redzoneinTheLab.com.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. I am Deuce. We are back again for some more Commanders talk with Matthew Powers from the Washington Times. And we thank you so much for joining us again, Matt. Today is Wednesday. It is the 25th. We're about 1 week removed from the owners meeting last week when there were a whole lot of fireworks. Matt, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good. Before we get into the owners meeting, let's talk a little bit about the Commanders weeks 1 through 6. Just your overall take from weeks 1 through 6. What are they?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a weird season. I guess you could always say that about these guys, but the first couple of weeks, it didn't really look like, Rivera had talked about this year 3 jump that Washington wanted to make, and that that this was the right time for them to do so, and it didn't look like that was really gonna take hold. It looked like there had been a lack of progress, frankly, under Rivera. But the last few weeks, things have started to turn, and I think the big headline is that the defense is back to being kind of that dominant unit that we saw in 2020. And as long as they can do that, then yeah, I think this offense is good enough to have a chance. But it's also really just a matter of how well does this team perform now. And there's been some ups and downs, and especially with Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz, who's injured. It's been an eventful season for sure, and that's not even including all the Snyder stuff that's happened.
Yeah. So during the Bears game, did you all know, like at halftime, that something was wrong with this finger?
I mean, we saw the replay in real time. What's weird about it, though, if you go back and look at the stats, Carson Wentz actually performed better
With the broken finger, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like the completion, he wasn't chucking it downfield or anything like that. I mean, I think, physically he was limited by the injury, but statistically he was still able to complete on short throws. The completion percentage was much better after the injury occurred. Frankly, he had a slow start, but he was also dealing with that shoulder injury. I think that was bothering him too. He was definitely banged up, and it makes sense to, he has a broken finger, so he had surgery for it, and he's gonna miss a few weeks here. So it made sense to shut him down in the meantime. But yeah, he was a guy that was struggling for sure.
Yeah. So I guess a day or two after we get I get the tweet, you might have known before me, but Carson Wentz broken finger. It might be out 4 to 6 weeks. When you first heard about it, what was the first thoughts? Here come the Heineke hive. That was my first thoughts. What was your first thoughts when you heard?
I mean, mine was more so, I thought it was kind of a disaster for the team, not necessarily because of what Heineke, I think Heineke's a fine quarterback. There's maybe an argument to be made even that he's as good or better quarterback, but we can talk about that in a second or whatever. But it's a disaster in the sense that Washington poured all these resources into Wentz, and this just took away from the evaluation process. We didn't know at the time how long the injury would be. I know it was 4 to 6 weeks, but this season was all about, for Rivera, could he finally address the quarterback position? Could they get enough progress out of that position to where it seemed like this franchise was on the upswing? And by not having those 4 to 6 weeks to evaluate that, then that's, it's my first initial thought was it's problematic, but I hate that word. So
Yeah.
another one. But it's a blow to the franchise because
Yeah.
you just need to know whether Carson Wentz is that guy. Now, a lot of skeptics could say immediately, no, he isn't, but that's not what the team believes, and they just needed that evaluation. They needed a full season's worth of evaluation because, frankly, it kind of creates some excuses for the coaching staff. But that's the last thing you want if you're a frustrated Washington fan. And so, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, that's what I think, because if you only use these first 6 weeks, it's not good.
No.
It's not good at all. And you can look at Carson, you can look at Scott Turner, Ron Rivera, however you want to look at it. I don't care. The end product is that it's not good. And just looking at it from that point, this is not somebody that you would say, okay, let's extend and make him our franchise quarterback, especially everything else dealing with Carson Wentz.
Right. Well, to piggyback off that too, like it, to be fair to them, they were counting on the development happening later in the season. They wanted Wentz to get into that rhythm to be able to pay off later in the season. So by taking an extended break like this, he doesn't get those reps under his belt. He doesn't get that time acclimated in the system that this is a new offense for him. So you could maybe point later in the season and saying, look, Carson Wentz went through his growing pains, but now he's in a rhythm. Well, he doesn't get a chance to get in that rhythm because now he's sidelined with an injury. So it's just a bit of a bummer all the way around.
Yeah, and let's get right into these next few weeks, 4 weeks or 4 to 5. I know the short-term hour is 4, so we know he'll miss at least 4 games. I'm looking at it as like 5 or 6 games, but here we go. Taylor versus Wentz versus Howell. I was never ready to put Howell in right now, but this is how I looked at 6 games. If we somehow go like 4-2 and we're winning, not because in spite of what Heineke is doing, I say you stick with him. If we go 1-5, 2-4, we look incredibly bad, I say you go to Howell. Because one thing about Howell I don't want to do, I don't want to put him, evaluate him in a situation where there's nothing to play for. Like, I think that's not a good way to evaluate someone that you might say, like, can this be our franchise player? But I think we do go back to Wentz if we're winning in spite of Taylor Heineke. Like, if the defense is just like completely balling out, then I think that's something that you do. How do you feel about them 3 moving forward?
Yeah, I think with Heineke versus Wentz, right, it just depends how much of a groove the offense is in. I think that the advantage that Heineke has is it's 2 things. One, the guys seem to rally around him in the way that, not necessarily even in taking a shot at Wentz.
Exactly.
But there's something about him that they gravitate to, that the guys really seem to feed off him. But more so than that, I think with the benefit of having Heineke as your starter last season is now all right, this is the way we have to play when this guy's in here. It may not be spectacular offense, but if the defense can keep things close, then they're going to go to the running game. They're going to try and take the occasional shot down the field. They're going to really rely on the circumstances around Heineke to try and prop up the overall team. And there's a thin margin for error when you play like that, but they know how to play like that. Whereas with Wentz, I think they were still trying to figure out, all right, what's working for us, what's not working. Can we be a little bit more aggressive? They were still trying to figure out how to exactly fit Wentz's strengths into the offense. What could he do? What couldn't he do? And so with Heineke, you don't really have that. You just kind of know what he is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a benefit in the short term to having that. I think maybe the ceiling for Wentz is still higher, but we weren't seeing that necessarily. So it just kind of depends on how those are. Now with Howell, I kind of disagree. I think the only way he gets playing time is if it is in a situation where it's clearly things clearly aren't going Washington's way, then it makes sense to pivot towards the evaluation, see what you have in the kid. Um, you know, I think if Howe were to play, it would be during the stretch where Wentz is out. If Heineke had, let's say,
Mm,
he had a really strong, or Heineke had a weak first half, right? And
yeah, most
that
definitely.
carried over. If there were 3 games of that kind of half, you would maybe see Howe in week 4, maybe even sooner than that. Like, it's just kind of
But
dependent
that
on.
fourth game is against the Eagles.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Right. Well, okay. So, putting circumstances up, but
Yeah, I got you. I got
just
you.
like,
I got you. Yeah.
something like that, where you're
Yeah.
throwing him in to see what you have in him versus I don't think they want Sam Howell's first NFL game to be, all right, we really need this one from you, kid. Like, go out there and
Yeah.
for us, because frankly, he's just not at that point, and I don't think he's that type of player yet. He's very much a developmental type of player, a player who has, I think, a high upside, but he's not. He still has a ways to go.
That makes sense. When we think about Scott Turner and how he kind of approached this season, it seems like we had more of a first half of the Jaguars game type of game this past week. And just to kind of, do you think he was trying to, what I'm trying to say, should he have continue with that type of, like, we will usually do this for Heineke, but we're going to start Wentz off with the same type of package we would give Heineke to give him a little more? But do you think he was too aggressive in trying to do the big things that he's always wanted to do?
Sort of. I think that the problem that they were trying to get the problem with Wentz, or trying to incorporate Wentz, was I think they looked at that Indy situation last year. There was this really interesting nugget in this Albert Beer story from the offseason that I've been fixated on for months. It said the reason Washington's coaching staff felt like Wentz fell out to a rhythm in Indianapolis because they started to shift toward Jonathan Taylor as the season went along. That Wentz performed well initially, but by the end of it, he had really fallen off. And I think one of the reasons they identified that shift was because they went so Taylor-centric in Indianapolis with the run game that it didn't allow Carson Wentz to get into a rhythm early, and then he was affected by it by the rest of the season. So I think they went the other way the first few games with Wentz, that we're going to throw the ball on first down. We're going to try and get him into a rhythm with these short throws to set up the bigger passing attacks down the field. Now, there were a bunch of problems with that. One, the offensive line was not nearly good enough to help, Wentz when you're passing 40 times a game. The offensive line just wasn't doing its job. They weren't getting production from the run game even when they were trying to do it. And they were trying to find this rhythm of, all right, how long is Wentz going to hold the ball? Is he going to get it out in 3 seconds, which is a lot for an NFL quarterback, or are we going to have him try and throw 2.4 seconds, 2.5? Like, by near the last few weeks before Wentz got hurt, he was getting the ball out like that. Like, they were really emphasizing to him to throw the ball quickly. So those are the things you kind of have to work through with a new quarterback, of trying to find that rhythm and stuff like that, where, again, with Heineke, I think they just kind of know more how they should play. I think stylistically there were some differences between the two.
Hi, I'm Christian Miles, native Washingtonian and real estate agent servicing the Washington metropolitan area. I started my career as an investor and later transitioned to the residential side. I really wanted to leave the investor side because I wanted to connect with people. Building relationships is important to me. I understand the buying and selling process can be challenging. I get it. I've been there. I'm a mom, wife, friend, and neighbor. I absolutely love helping families and connecting with people. Going through the home buying and selling process is stressful enough. When working with me, I make it fun. As a realtor, I think it's important to be able to connect with you. Every detail is important, no matter how small. Let me take care of the heavy lifting while you focus on the joys of finding a new home. Something I live by: People may not remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. With me, it's an experience.
All right, so that's some good football talk. But let's get into the owners, specifically Jim Irsay. You know, you were there in New York, so you had a firsthand experience of everything that went on, especially with Jim Irsay. And one of his comments was, "There's merit, like there's merit right there is already like a." Where is he going with this? Like he could have did a dramatic pause after there's merit, and then he says to remove Dan Snyder as owner of the Redskins, which was like, okay, where have you been, Jim Irsay? But that's another question. Of the Redskins and everything that kind of trickled. He even doubled down. He was saying, like, I could care less if he has dirt on me. I don't care. This is the right thing to do, and all types of things. That's kind of like doubling down on, hey, look, if we should move him, if we have to move him, like, but you were there, you had questions for Roger Goodell. I mean, just tell me how it was there in New York, man.
Yeah, so it's a lot less sexy than it appears because you get there at 9 a.m. and you're just waiting around all day for some people to come out and talk. You don't know what they're going to say, but and Irsay, for context, didn't really talk around until like 3 p.m. But, you know, he delivered the goods. He was the first owner. What was surprising about it was he was the first owner to publicly come out against Dan Snyder. You know, there had been anonymous owners kind of grumbling the last few months. There was that ESPN story that Washington Post also reported that the owners had started to shift on Snyder, same with Pro Football Talk. So there had been rumblings, but for an owner to actually put it out there definitely signified the shift that's gone on in the NFL. Now, the big question is, are enough owners going to follow Irsay's lead? Is anyone else going to come out? Will they actually take a vote? Because that's the thing is, do they want to set this precedent for removing an owner? And then following also on that is, you know, there's that ESPN story whether Dan Snyder or not has dirt on fellow owners, and if he does, how ugly does this get? There's just a lot of things left remain to be seen.
Yeah, and like right after that, a couple of days later, the report or whatever come out about Jerry Jones, and that was everybody was like, "Oh, there's Dan. He's starting to release stuff." I was like, "Oh man, this is going to be wild." But the thing about the 24 votes, like we know we need at least 24 votes. I don't if it ever gets to a point where that's going to happen, I think it'll be a silent vote. I don't think it'll be, you know, a public vote, and it may, but I just think that, hey, look, we have enough votes. You can either sell or we can go through with this. What's your feels on just the different owners there? I know Jerry Jones had some comments. I think Arthur, him and not Arthur Blank. What's the I can't think of his name. And
Robert Kraft.
Yeah, Robert Kraft. Some things came out about them having a few choice words about. I don't think it came out about exactly what it was, but what was the feels on kind of sort of like the owners surrounding Dan Snyder?
Yeah, I mean, after Irsay's comments and after Goodell talked, there was kind of a mad dash to avoid reporters and get the hell out of there. So a lot of them, you know, kept to Goodell's line. Goodell's line was basically, you know, speculation without facts is irresponsible, and that we should wait for the facts. We should wait for the Mary Jo White investigation to conclude. And so they did. You know, no one besides Irsay made any public comments. Jerry Jones said that it was more of a media creation than something that was actually bothered. Which, you know, is an interesting way to frame things. So yeah, you know, it was Irsay coming out was a big deal, but Snyder maybe got lucky in a sense because it could have been worse for him if at least one other owner had publicly said they agreed with Irsay. With
Goodell in the position that he's put in, what was the let us know what was the question that you had for Goodell.
Yeah, so Mark Maskey from the Washington Post asked a lot about Irsay, and other people asked about Irsay as well. So I was curious. There was this line in the ESPN story that fellow owners are frustrated with Snyder's inability to land a new stadium for Washington. So I focus on the stadium component of, the deal in Virginia falling apart, and with Maryland saying that they were frustrated. I asked Roger Goodell whether how concerned was the league about Washington's inability to land a stadium, and whether he thought the investigation into Snyder was harming their ability to land it. And he gave me an answer about how these things take time and so on and so forth. I'm kind of kicking myself. I probably should have done a better job of anticipating what his response was going to be, but I tried to zag a little bit when everyone was zigging.
Mhm.
But it didn't-
Catch him off guard.
it
He was
didn't-
ready.
I
He was ready.
I was filibustered, which I don't like when that happens. But, I'll take my L and move
I guess
on.
he's good at it, right? He's had it enough.
Right.
So before we get out of here, what's your position on, or your take, or what's your thoughts on the new stadium? For me, I don't think you won't hear anything until like after November, but what's your feels on the stadium relocation?
Yeah, I'm curious to see whether the Virginia bill will have any new life. They tabled it for the following year. I think in January is when they'll start talking about it again. And a lot of it just depends on where things are at, where the investigation's at with Snyder. Does he come out of the clear of that? What's the team progress like? Because you think in this, Virginia politicians are basically like begging to give Washington a
Right.
stadium, but I don't think, if you think about the Robert Griffin, think about when they landed in Richmond, right? That was the 2013 season, 2012. There was all this excitement because in 2012, Robert Griffin,
Yep.
his rookie year, they were 10-6. They made the playoffs. There was all this great buzz, and it was like, look, now we're headed to Richmond. Well, there's not really that positive momentum here for a team that would help them land a stadium in Virginia. So I do think the results on the field play a small part in it. And then, they had to clean up the off-field controversies and all those sorts of things. But if it's not Virginia, maybe Maryland gets back involved. I think DC is still pretty dead in the water. It looks like Maryland right now is the favorite, but who knows where Virginia is. That's kind of where I'm curious whether those talks get started up again.
What's your preference? If you had the choice, what would you want it to be?
I live in Alexandria, so I'm in a I'm only 25 minutes from FedEx. Landover kind of is whatever to me. Just somewhere that's closer, not
Like one Loudon? You don't want
Woodbridge
one Loudon?
is not I'm not a fan of the Woodbridge thing because 95 traffic. I've lived there for 6 years, but
Cool.
that area is like now. So
Cool. So let's just say the next 4 games. What do you think the outlook is going to be? And then we can get out of here. What do you think the outlook in the next 4 games is going to be?
I do like their chances to win Sunday just based on, the Colts seem like a tire fire. It seems like with as well as the defense is playing, this is a game that they could really show that improvement too. Indianapolis's offensive line isn't great. They're making a quarterback change. Maybe they feast off. He's not technically a rookie, but his first career start. And then the Vikings. It seems like the Vikings are pretty good. I know 5-1. They've had some close games, but hat tip to Kevin O'Connell. He's doing a good job there.
Yep.
Let's see the Eagles. I'm missing a game in there, aren't I? Or is it the Eagles after? Yeah, it's the Eagles after.
Yeah, the Eagles, and then it's the
Monday night.
Texans.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
The Eagles. We saw how that went. I don't think there's going to be anything that really changes about that. That were the explosives that they cut down on, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't get a renewed sense of optimism now for that. And then Houston,
that'll be the sweet spot game. That if we look terrible these next 3 games,
But
if you want to
that
make
could
a
be the Sam
decision.
Howell game, so.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So maybe that'll be bring a little excitement. Thank you again, Matthew. Appreciate you so much for joining. Just let everyone where we can find all of your work.
Yeah, you can find me on the Washington Times, WashingtonTimes.com/sports, and then follow me on Twitter, please. It's at Matthew_Paras, Paras.
Thank you so much for joining, Matthew. Thank you so much. Thank you all out there for listening. Thank you for watching. This is Red Zone in the Lab podcast. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.
Thank you for listening to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Red Zone in the Lab. And you can download our podcast at Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. And please visit our website at redzoneinTheLab.com. Thank you.